The late modern family. In this presentation, Justin, Matilda, Mia, and I, Emma, will be talking about the late modern family. We'll be covering some important terms in relation to the topic, and we'll be explaining why things are the way they are and how it came to be this way. The first thing we're going to touch on is detraditionalization, which is a key term that characterizes the late modern family. This is not necessarily to throw away traditions, but to be so aware of all your options that you no longer choose to act in a certain way because it's tradition. But you act the way you do because it's what you want the most. Going with traditions is no longer the norm, and there is no pressure from society to act a certain way. A great example of detraditionalization would be marriage. Today, people don't choose to marry as the very first thing. Couples will make sure that they're financially stable and they'll possibly have kids and be together for a lot of years before maybe deciding to get married. Today, it's also very common that you as a couple choose to live together and form a family for your entire life, but without necessarily having to get married. Also, in relation to detraditionalization, we're going to be talking about norms, because there is no pressure from society anymore to take a certain path. There are also fewer norms. A norm is a rule of behavior that you must obey in order for a society to work. Every community has its own norms. Denmark has its own norms. The classroom you're in, your dance team, whatever, has its own norms. All these norms will be slightly different depending on the culture. There are two different kinds of norms, the first norm being the formal norm and the second one being the informal norm. Both of these also deal with sanctions, which is a form of punishment that you get for deviating from the norm. The first norm is the formal norm, which very simply is written and also have formal consequences. An example of this would be that we know there's a law stating that it's illegal to steal, and we know of the consequences of breaking this rule, which would be prison or jail or getting a fine, which would be the sanction. An informal norm is also very simply an unwritten rule or norm, which consequences are not as clearly defined. However, they still apply. Informal rules, as well as formal rules, deviate with each community and each culture. An example of an informal rule could be to give up your bus seat for an elderly passenger or to take up your shoes before entering someone else's house. If we talk about sanction in relation to informal rules, it would be being cast out from the community or getting a bad reputation, which also goes with prejudgments.
Disembedment is when we move the social activities that used to be within the family outside the family in institutions. In the late modern society, both parents often work in order to provide the continually expanding needs and wants of the late modern family, leaving no one to care for the children. Daycare institutions are established to watch over the children. We have to have trust that these institutions will care for our children. Primary socialization is the first socialization that happens in a child's life. It happens at home, where the child learns to adapt to norms within the home. The child transitions from a biological being to a social being. This is the first stage toward the child becoming a citizen and suited to join a community. Secondary socialization happens outside the home. It happens in institutions such as daycare, kindergarten, school. The children learn how to behave in different social settings. They learn different norms and about sanctions that follow if you do not follow the norms. Socialization is not something the child is actively trying to do, but a progress which happens automatically. Children in the late modern society start socializing from a very early age. When children are socialized multiple places, they learn to be more open toward different cultures and ways of thinking. They learn about behavior and begin to see the world with a wider view and become more wise.
Reflexivity. All these possibilities caused by detraditionalization forces the late modern family to reflect, the act of measuring yourself in the world around you, comparing aspects of yourself to other people by continually being aware of reflexivity, growing, being better, a lot of pressure on individual, which the modern family allows for. This sometimes means that especially youth have hard times establishing a permanent identity. Individualization is when each family member can grow individually, they can choose their own paths and make their own choices. Face-to-face relations. In the traditional society, people have trust in one another. They had face-to-face relations. People were trusted. People were trusting each other. Face-to-face relations are interacting or talking to another human being who are physically there with you. In the modern family, a new type of relation appeared, the faceless relation. People are also trusting systems in the modern society. We have trust in the transportation system to work, in the company to pay you. For example, you don't see the people who build your car, but you still trust them enough to drive it. It's the opposite of the face-to-face relations where we know the people we trust.
There are different types of societies. The first one is the traditional society, where everything is at home. People start their lives at home and then they continue socializing at home, and everything happens at home. There's no private or public sphere. All your life is happening in a local community. The main goal is survival. So that's why most of the things are family based. That's mostly the agriculture societies. All of the relations are face-to-face relations. So you trust your mom, your dad, and your grandmom if you live in the traditional society. There's no system as in other kinds of society. And these kind of societies were from the dawn of man until the 1850s, where a new type of society appeared. The industrial society, where the head of the family, which is usually the father, goes to work and the rest of the family stays home. Here, family is also defined differently since it's only the parents and the children that live together. And in these kind of societies, there's a split between the private and the public sphere, where the private sphere is more personal and intimate. The public sphere is the politic system, if the country has one, or the work environment. After World War II, a new type of society appeared, which is the late modern society, where we are much more dependent on the state for it to take care of our children, to take care of our elderly. We also have trust in systems. So as Matilda said, we have faceless relations. In the modern society, both the mother and the father go to work, and the children also get to institutions. So it's a much more individual society. That's why we can say that the family has become individualized, where you are the most important part of the family. It's your own responsibility to take care of you and to be well and survive. In conclusion, the continually increasing freedom gives us better chances for pursuing happiness than ever before, as quoted by Giddens.